First of all, thank you so much for coming. I know some of you have travelled a fair distance. I really appreciate it. I'm really grateful for this opportunity to exercise my absolute passion of promoting aquascaping to you guys. Hopefully you can learn something, take away some tips and tricks, and maybe even this full setup. I have to thank a few people before I get started. So firstly, Aquascape for sponsoring this event. Excellent company, been working with them for quite a while now, and the reason I work with them is because I have a lot of respect for them and they have the same values that I do. And a huge thank you also to UNS for supplying all this beautiful equipment. They've supplied some amazing plants as well. Tropica, who've supplied the soil and also some plants. SR Aquaristic, who have supplied the amazing Hardscape. Went to their facility today, mind blown. And finally, by no means least, the Chicago Aquatic Plant Society for organising, without a doubt, the best run and organised event that I've ever had the pleasure to be at. So, round of applause for vodka. It's not really. Most of you know my name's George Farmer. I'm full-time aquascaper. I've been now for 4 or 5 years, and I feel really kind of privileged that I found a purpose in my life, and that is to aquascape and promote aquascaping. I really believe it can transform people's lives. I've had people chatting to me this evening who've expressed this. Certainly transformed my life for the better, and it really helps to personally, and hopefully for you guys as well, helps you to connect with nature. And I think this is a really important thing in this day and age where we live very much in a digital age where we're always looking at our phones or we're working in front of a computer screen. And some of us don't have gardens necessarily, some of us aren't into houseplants so much perhaps. But you know, an aquascape is just something that's really beautiful to live with, beautiful to kind of maintain and just watch grow and evolve. You have this kind of creative input into it, and it's just a beautiful hobby. I'm sure most of you agree, and that's why you're here. And yeah, I just thought I'd let you know why I love aquascaping so much. It's a really important thing for me. So today's demonstration, of course, we're going to aquascape this beautiful UNS system. I'll talk about the equipment in a bit more detail as we go through. I'll talk about the individual components. Do leave any questions to the end, and we'll do a full-on live Q&A session. And I'm going to hopefully create something quite beautiful. And if you've bought raffle tickets, is it too late to buy raffle tickets now?
Never too late.
You do have a chance of winning this, and I think there's some more prizes back there as well. And you can see it's a great system. So UNS Ultimate Nature Systems, got the lighting hanging kit here, the Titan lights here, LED, full spectrum, beautiful aquarium, 60 centimetres, ultra low iron glass. So for those that don't know, low iron means it's basically more transparent. The higher iron the glass, the more kind of green it is. You can see this is like a light blue colour. And quite unique with the UNS tanks, it has these mitered joints here. So they're actually joined together at a 45-degree angle, which is quite special. The cabinet, wood cabinet, really nice, classy. It's got a nice little badge here, and it's got some slots here, which later on, when whoever wins it, will be able to attach their filter and have their clear hoses coming over the side with some glass. And the idea behind the stuff coming over the side is that we don't kind of spoil the view from behind. So ideally, you might want to have a pale wall behind here, have this a little bit away from the wall, and then the light spill will illuminate the wall behind, and you'll get this really nice sense of depth from the aquarium. Just noticed a little grub screw in here. I blame Jennifer Williams for that. Sorry, Jenna. So, beautiful tank. I really like the 60 centimetre size. It's big enough to have a lot of creative kind of potential, but it's not so big that it's going to be super expensive to maintain and stock, and doesn't take too long to maintain. So really nice size, one of my favourites. Interestingly, I think, is John here, UNS rep? Where's John? Is he here? No. It's embarrassing. I'm not going to talk about his products anymore. 60 centimetres long, I think it's 36 high, depending on 36 centimetres high. That's actually a really important, it might be 40 actually, but the ratio is really important. We call this the aspect ratio. And Amano was the first guy to really kind of use this. And the classic ADA tank was the 60p, which is 60 by 36. And this ratio is what we call like the golden ratio, which is like super important and basically really aesthetically pleasing, aesthetically balanced. So that's the reason for that. This is slightly wider front to back than the 60p, I think. So we have a little bit more of a bigger footprint, which gives us more room to aquascape as well. A couple of disadvantages, you can see it's obviously open top, no hood. A couple of disadvantages, I'll start with those first. You do get evaporation. I know we live in a hard water area here in Chicago, so if you are using tap water and you do live in Chicago, as the water evaporates, you will very much likely see some hard water kind of build up around the rim. You can clean that off with an appropriate kind of cleaning tool. You need to stop the fish carefully. You can get fish that are quite sort of jumpy and they might jump out and kind of commit suicide. Amano shrimp tend to like to commit suicide as well, and sometimes I've found them like halfway up my stairs, they're just like crazy. So do bear that in mind, stop the fish carefully. Good things though, if you do have a lot of hardscape, a lot of planting, a lot of surface cover, it provides a sense of security for the fish and hopefully they won't jump out. Okay. So that's the system in a nutshell. Beautiful system, should fit nicely into anyone's living space. Okay, let's start off with the, let's talk about the nature aquarium concept. I'm going to be creating a nature aquarium today, and this was a kind of philosophy invented by Takashi Amano. Sadly passed away in 2015, just over 4 years ago now. And he came up with this kind of new idea of creating an aquarium using natural materials in a way that really invokes this sense of nature, bringing this nature from the outside into the aquarium space. You're not necessarily directly copying a scene from nature that you might see these days with a diorama style. You know, you get these kind of shrunken mountainscapes or underwater caves or forests. But he is using the kind of essence of nature, so use of woods, rocks, live plants, and creating just something not only beautiful to look at, but also a really healthy environment for the fish. So the plants will produce oxygen, they provide shelter and security for the fish, and it's just something that's really beautiful to look at. And I think it's something really special about the Nature Aquarium aquascape versus any other. And it really does almost, I'm not particularly a religious guy, but there's something quite soulful about it. It really helps to connect on a real deep level with the nature. And I think this is something really special about the Nature Aquarium, and this is why I love it so much, and it's why it's my favourite style of aquascape. I do other styles, some of you may have seen them, but this is absolutely my favourite. Okay, so we're going to do a nature aquarium. We're going to use wooden rocks, we're going to use soil, and we've got more plants than I can care to mention. So many plants, it's going to be awesome. Okay, let's start off with the substrate system. So tropical aquarium plants, they produce a very good soil, very good reputation. Been using it for years. I've probably used it in over 100 aquascapes now, in my own and clients' aquascapes. Proven performer, really consistent in its quality. Some brands you tend to get different batches which have different kind of nutrient levels, but this tends to be really consistent. So you don't need to rinse it like you do with like a sand or a gravel, which tends to come loaded with dust and debris. With the soil, you can just literally add it. Some people like to add maybe some bacteria powders underneath and stuff like this, but I just add the soil directly and have no issues. So this contains nutrients, so it will feed the plant roots. It also has what we call a high cation exchange capacity. That's just a fancy way of saying it takes in nutrients from the water, it locks those nutrients into the soil, and it makes those nutrients available to the plant roots. That being said, it is normally a good idea to add liquid fertiliser as well, because plants will not only take in nutrients from their roots, they also take them into their leaves. So the idea is to promote the healthiest plant growth possible, and we do that by providing appropriate nutrients, like I said, through the roots and through the leaves. If you have epiphyte plants, they're plants that attach to the decor. They're obviously not going to have their roots in the soil, so you will need potentially more liquid fertiliser for those. Okay, I think we'll add another bag. Good idea, top tip, is to start off shallower at the front and then slope it towards the rear. This creates the kind of optical illusion that the tank is actually deeper front to back than it really is, because it's sloping up. This helps it look deeper. And also you can use that to your advantage with the actual aquascaping. You can slope it any way you like, depending on the kind of composition of the aquascape you want. For instance, today I set up a couple of scapes on the Oase booth for Aquashella, and I deliberately sloped one way and one the other because of the positions on the stand. I deliberately wanted to kind of create this effect. So this is a really good learning point as well. Think about where you're going to have that aquarium in your living space and position, and think about the aquascape in terms of its composition. You know, where are you going to be sat when you're going to be viewing that scape from, and maybe compose that aquascape accordingly. So let's say we're going to be sat there where that gentleman is. You might want to start off with smaller plants around here and then build up over here, so you get this really nice sense of depth. And then if we're viewing it from over there, where that lady is there, you might want to do the opposite. Or if you're viewing it directly from the front, you might want to, just scape it accordingly. Think about where you're going to be sat when you're viewing the scape. Pretty quiet.
The Q&A is after.
I won't use all of it, don't want to be greedy. Okay, there's not really an optimum depth, and the really good thing about soil is that because it's like a very loose kind of porous structure, it allows a really good colony of bacteria to establish because of its porous structure, and it also allows for really good oxygen penetration. So you don't necessarily need to worry about having it too steep. This is particularly true if you're going to be planting heavily with plants with roots, because the roots will produce oxygen when they're growing, and this is going to help prevent any kind of excess anaerobic bacteria or lack of oxygen. Potential danger with like a fine gravel or a sand, if it goes too deep, you get a build-up of excess anaerobic bacteria, things go anoxic, and then this leads to potential hydrogen sulfide production, which is a toxic gas. You can get these like really nasty gas pockets, smells like rotten eggs, and the fish don't like it either. So some real fancy scapers, they use like gloves or a paintbrush. I'm not that fancy, so. So that'll do for now. Good. So that's the soil in place. A lot of questions I get asked, how long do the nutrients last in the soil? How long is a piece of string? Twice as long as half its length. Is the answer to that. It really depends on the plants you're using, if you're using liquid fertilisers, how fast those plants are growing. So there is no fixed answer. Take kind of comfort in the fact that if you are dosing liquid fertilisers regularly, then the nutrient content of the soil becomes kind of less important, because those plants can adapt and they can use more nutrients through their leaves. So potentially you can, soil will last several years. It will eventually kind of break down into like a muddy kind of sludge substance. This isn't necessarily an issue unless you might have some ground dwelling fish that are disturbing the soil, or you want to rescape a lot and take plants out and put them in. You're going to create like a muddy mess in there basically. This isn't an issue either, but you just need to follow those processes up with a really big water change. Basically every time you disturb an established soil, you're potentially leaching those nutrients from the soil into the water column, especially ammonia, and this will, it could cause health problems for livestock, but more than likely it will cause algae as well. Ammonia is a huge trigger for algae growth. Is everyone learning? I'm even learning myself. Okay. Good, soil's in. What's the next step, anyone? Yes! And what's really important about the hardscape? It's the backbone of the layout. So we've got some beautiful hardscape from SR Aquaristic. If you're a hobbyist, you can order it online. If you're a retailer, I think you can order it online or even visit the place. They've got an amazing selection of wood and rocks, and I had the privilege today of visiting these guys. Got a guided tour and could handpick some really, really nice pieces. Is everyone going to Aquashella here? Yeah. Be shame not to, isn't it? Yeah, all the hardscape we used on the Awase booth is all SR Aquaristic as well, and I think they're sponsoring several other events at the show as well, so keep an eye out. Keep an eye out for these lovely people. Okay, so I'm going to start off with the wood first. This is called, anyone from SR Aquaristic here? Yes. What's it called? Spiderwood. There we go. So I've got 4 pieces here. I might not use them all, but I am going to start off with the biggest piece. I did kind of come up with a rough composition actually at the location, and I can't remember what I did. So I'm just going to kind of wing it. So composition, I'm going to go for a kind of standard sort of island composition, foreground, midground, background. I might change it later, but at the moment we're going to go for kind of standard island, where the kind of the most impactful part of the hardscape is going to be kind of around the centre of the scape. Now, it's a good idea to talk about composition in more detail. Composition is how does the subject appear in the frame. So the aquarium here is the frame, this is the subject, of course, and we can use things like compositional guidelines, like the rule of thirds. Most of you have a camera on your phone, and some of you might have seen this grid. This is deliberately split into the rule of thirds. The idea of that is that you should be aligned, well, you shouldn't have to, but you can align the main kind of focal point, the main weight of the subject up with that rule of thirds. So the main weight is here, and as you can see, it's around about 2/3 of the way along here, or 1/3 of the way along here on the horizontal axis. So we'll start off with that there. We might fiddle around and have a adjustment later. So on its own, that's not, you know, it looks nice, but it's not so impressive. So let's make it look a little bit more kind of complex, a little bit more interesting to look at. Let's add a second piece. So this wood will want to float, I think. Is that right? Yeah, maybe. Good job you're here. I've never done this before. Okay, so we're using the rule of thirds again, and the one on the left is in line with the third, roughly. There we are. So, just because I can, let's add a bit more. So, when you're choosing your hardscape, you want it to be interesting. If you imagine just like a lump of wood, you know, without any kind of spines coming off it or anything like that, it'd look a little bit boring, not much visual interest. This is really interesting. It's got Obviously different twigs, different sizes, they're all kind of gnarly, looks really, really nice. So they're quite almost symmetrical. We don't often use symmetry in aquascaping. It tends, your eyes tend to kind of dart left and right and they don't settle down. So we try to keep it kind of weighted either left or right. So with that in mind, let's pop. So I'm just looking at this. This is really quite complex now. We've got lots of twigs over here, and this is relatively simple. So let's try and balance it out a little bit by having a little bit more kind of visual interest over here, and pop this one. And about there. Better. And then last piece. Now it's really a good idea to think about think about maintenance as well. So you don't necessarily want the wood to be kind of too far close to the glass because you're not going to be able to get your toothbrush or your credit card or whatever cleaning device you're using. So think long term and how you're going to maintain the scape. If you've got time, then have a look at the hardscape. If it's got any kind of sawn off edges, you might want to kind of cut those off, maybe with some bonsai clippers or something. So for instance here we've got like a sawn off edge here which looks man-made and not very natural, so in due course I would probably get some like snips, like wire cutters or something, and just trim that end, make it look a bit more natural. And then one of the great things about a rimless tank, open top tank, is that you can have stuff coming out the top. So obviously we've got the wood coming out the top now. You can have emergent plant growth. There we go. Just going to bury that a bit more, so hopefully it's going to have less chance of floating. I'm not filling with water today, actually, so I'm not bothered. Whoever wins it, I'll have a chat. Whoever wins it, I'll have a chat with them, and we can talk about what they need to do when they get home. So it's a good idea to take your time when you're hardscaping. It is the backbone of the layout. It's the most important, arguably the most important part of the aquascape. If you get the hardscape right at the beginning, then more than likely you're going to have good success with the aquascape. If you start off with a poor hardscape, either in terms of composition or not enough material, it's going to look weak. It's not going to have much impact, and you're going to have to rely on the plants for the impact, and it's not going to look as good, basically. So focus not only on buying enough hardscape, but buying the best quality that you can find. If you have to resort to mail order, I'll give another shout out to SR Aquaristic. They do the what you see is what you get. So on their website, they do actually, you can see the physical pieces that you're going to buy, and I think they even do their own kind of rock collections as well. So you're guaranteed to receive something that's going to be to your taste, which I think is a really great idea. Okay, so I'm relatively happy with that. If I was at home, I'd probably take a bit longer. You know, set it up and then go away, have a cup of tea or a glass of wine or whatever, and even wait a day or so, come back to it. How does it look? Can I make it look any better? If I can, then do so. Just keep playing around with it until you can't make it, until you think you can't make it look any better. Okay, I think we're nearly there. A little bit worried about it floating, but as I said, we're not filling with water. So we'll put some rocks on it. Got some beautiful dragonstone here. Another shout out to SR Aquaristic. I think they actually clean the dragonstone, don't they, before they sell it, which is amazing, because dragonstone is usually absolutely caked in dust and debris and mud. So if you do buy this from somewhere else, then you will need to wash it. But this stuff's been cleaned already, so it's great. Dragonstone, really popular aquascaping material. Dragonstone and Sirius stone are probably the two most popular stones that we commonly find in aquascaping. Called dragonstone because it has this kind of scale texture to it. Looks really attractive. Looks better when it's wet. I think it's like almost really, really compact clay material. I don't think it impacts the water chemistry particularly, whereas Sirius stone is a very sort of heavy limestone based material, which will potentially increase your pH and hardness. Although you live in a super hard water area anyway, you're going to have less impact. I think most people kind of have Malawi cichlids and stuff over here, don't they? Because it's such hard water. I did notice in the shed aquarium, loads and loads of cichlids, rainbow fish, obviously because of the hard water. And that's an interesting topic in itself. Choose the fish according to your water parameters. And if you want to keep sensitive fish, I was chatting to a lady earlier that has licorice gouramis, you know, and she uses reverse osmosis water because, you know, these fish are super sensitive, they need softer water, and it's imperative, you know, that the fish's welfare comes first. So we're positioning the stones now. I'm using what we call the strata in the stone, and this is the natural lines that you'll appear, the natural kind of flow. So you'll see on this stone here, you can see there's like a natural kind of line there. And what I do is align those lines towards their kind of center focal point. So we've got the kind of center here, we've got the lines coming up here, and then what I like to do is almost have the two stones. If you imagine drawing an imaginary line up here and an imaginary line across here, it should almost be like at a right angle. This is just a technique that I personally use. You don't have to use this, it just tends to look quite aesthetically pleasing. So I'm deliberately actually trying to position the stone also on top of the kind of buried branches under the soil, and this is hopefully going to help anchor that wood down and prevent it from floating when the lucky winner eventually fills the aquarium with water. So we've got two stones there, looks too symmetrical. We already talked about why symmetry isn't a good idea in aquascaping. So let's put a third stone in. And again, look at the strata here. And we've got a nice little branch down here that we can potentially wedge with our stone. So it's two purposes here, using the strata to make it look natural, but also burying that wood. Ideally, in an ideal sort of situation, you might want to pre-soak the wood, or at least test it to make sure it sinks. Some wood will leach a lot of tannins, different types of wood leach different amounts of tannins. This looks like, to me, my natural instinct, that this wouldn't leach much tannins. Other wood, Mapani wood, sort of generic bog wood tends to leach a lot more tannins. It's not necessarily a bad thing, and some people actually will deliberately go for this tannin stained look. Black water biotopes are becoming more popular, and you might want to actually deliberately create this black water environment. So we've got 3 stones in there. It could be we've got loads of plants, so probably only stick with the 3. Looks a little bit off balance, like with a lot of stone there on the left. But with the planting, I'm confident it's going to look more balanced. So consider that. Have a plan in your mind what plants you're going to use and where, and how that's going to affect the whole composition. So we've started off with a strong composition there, and then we're going to hopefully enhance that now with the planting. Which I've got so many, I don't know where to start. We've got the carpet. I've got to give a shout out to the to the caps guys for supplying plants, also UNS as well, which have got some really cool species that I've not seen before, and also Tropica, who I work closely with, have done for many years now. Real great selection of plants. There we go. So we're going to start off with the, is this Aquarius Parvula or Mini? Was anyone from UNS here yet? Parvula Mini. Nice. That's the good stuff. Okay, I'm going to use my own tweezers here. Had these tweezers 20 years. I tend to start off with the foreground and then work my way back. The reason for that is if I started off with like the background stems, if I was using stems, they tend to be a lot taller and they can flop around in front, and cover the soil, and it will be, obviously more tricky to plant. So start off with the foreground and then I'll work my way back, and then finally I'll attach my epiphyte plants. That's the general process I use. This block is really good. So, Aquarius Parvula Mini, it's obviously a mini form of hairgrass. For those that aren't aware, it's a carpeting species. What that means is it will send out little runners underneath the soil, it'll pop up new leaf blades, and eventually over several weeks or so, it will form a solid carpet, which looks really beautiful. And it's one of the, especially for beginners, it's one of those kind of plants that people really want to try, when they see a full carpet. It looks really beautiful and lush and invokes this sense of nature, which we talked about earlier with the concept of the nature aquarium, this essence of nature and bringing it into the aquarium space. So, grab your plants. I'm planting into dry soil, you might notice. A lot of people top up with a little bit of water to plant, but over the last couple of years or so, I've always planted into dry soil. I find it grips the plant better, so when we do eventually fill with water, hopefully we won't get any floaters. No one likes a floater. So just pop that in there, push it in. Doesn't really matter how deep it goes, as long as those roots are in contact with those soil grains, it's going to be absolutely fine. And then gently take your tweezers out. A lot of people tend to have a little bit of difficulty with this, and when they take their tweezers out, the plant comes out with it. It doesn't happen with me because I'm so skilled. But in all seriousness, if it does happen, then what you can do, just top tip, just pop your finger on top of the plant, like so, withdraw the tweezers, and then it will stay there like so. And if you have a limited number, we've got absolutely loads here, so it's not really irrelevant, but if you've got just a few kind of plantlets, good idea is to plant one side, plant the other, and then plant in between, and keep kind of dividing it in half, and then you're guaranteed kind of even coverage. Okay, good. Any volunteers? Go on there, son. Woo! Get it! Let's hear it for the brave young man. Have you planted before? Yes. There you go, you can use the special ones. No pressure. So if you, okay, cool. So if we carry on planting the dwarf hairgrass there. What's your name?
I'm Zeb.
Zebedee. That's a cool name, Zebedee. Nice to meet you. I'm George.
Well, George, he also told me earlier he got involved with Aquascaping because of your videos.
There we go.
So,
let's hear it for the videos. So if we just just kind of draw an imaginary line along there and just plant in front of this. Yeah, that's it. Okay, what I'm going to do is let's speed things up, make things a bit more efficient. Pop that. It's massive, isn't it? I need like some more hands.
Right on top of the filter.
Yeah, just bring that filter over here. Okay, mate. Somebody. Beautiful Awase filter. In all seriousness, the reason I work with so much with Awase now is largely because of this filter. Actually bought one myself a couple of years ago, well, maybe 3 years ago now, and was so impressed with it, I basically approached them and said, do you want to work together? Give me free stuff? And they're like, yeah. And And there we go. Next thing I know, I'm in a workshop for you guys. So thanks to Arze. They are a great filter. It's worth talking about them in a bit more detail. It's not a sales pitch because it's a product that I genuinely love and use myself in all my scapes at home and very happily promote it to other people. You know, they have a built-in pre-filter, so a traditional canister filter you'll have to take to pieces to clean it, whereas this just has a quick release, pull it out, take it to your tap, rinse it under the tap. It's not biological media, so you can use tap water to clean it, pop it back, and then that's the filter maintained. You can do it in, I think my record's 1 minute 37. Yeah. And also the pre-filter, you can have different size pores, so you can have fine, medium, or a coarse foam, depending on what kind of livestock you're keeping or how polished you want that water to be. And they even do now a carbon pre-filter as well, so you can get this super polished water. The Thermo comes in with a built-in heater as well, which is great. We don't want to be seeing ugly heaters in the aquarium, and you know, inline heaters tend to be quite expensive. It's another thing to clean, and you know, it's another thing that's breaking the chain in the hose. So to have it actually in the filter is a really good idea. So rush out and buy your Biomaster as soon as you can.
What did you use before them?
Save your questions till the end.
JBL, yeah.
So they
I've
make
used EI, I've used JBL, I used the Fluval G, does everyone remember that? The Fluval G filter? That had a quick release pre-filter, that's why I like that, but it didn't have the heater, and it wasn't particularly reliable either. I was in Germany, so you know, it's going to be like super reliable. It's like the algae of filters. Or BMW, or Volkswagen. No, but they're like naughty, aren't they? They've got the emissions thing. They're not the Volkswagen.
They just got fined.
Yeah. But they've got the new E-Golf, haven't they? That's come out. It's like a 3-year waiting list for that. I'm rambling again.
You're just adding color.
So it's worth talking about canister filters in general. We like to use canister filters because you could use an internal filter in here. You know, it's a relatively small aquarium, and you know, an internal filter would do the job, but it's just going to look super ugly. It's going to detract from this beautiful aquascape. You know, we've got low iron glass, we've got suspended lighting. You're going to be using a glass inlet and outlet. We're going to, you know, just keep it minimal. You want to be looking at the aquascape, you don't want to be seeing the ugly equipment. So this is why, one of the reasons why external canister filters are really good. And they offer the opportunity to change your media as well. You might want to use carbon, you might want to use Purigen. Seachem Purigen is a very good product for really polishing the water. You might want to use, say, super high phosphates. High phosphates generally aren't a problem in planted aquariums, but you might want to use a phosphate removal resin. But they just offer this opportunity to switch up your media. You know, some people like to change their biological media. Me personally, I'm not just saying this because otherwise they support me, but I just use the media that comes supplied with the filter. It's good enough. And in a heavily planted aquarium with healthy plant growth, the plants will actually do most of the biological filtration anyway. Doing a great job there, Zebedee.
Thank you, man.
Are you from Chicago?
Nope, I am from Newton, Georgia.
Georgia?
Well, I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, but
Okay.
I came out here from Newton, Georgia.
Wow, thank you. Did you fly?
Yep. Me and my wife.
Awesome. When did you come out?
Today,
And you didn't get hit by the storms?
we had a
Okay.
delay. So, great delay.
Sore subjects. Sorry. You're here now, mate, and you're planting
Man,
in front of 7 million people. It's a real pleasure to have you, mate.
You know what? I actually built my 20-gallon one time
Yeah.
after looking at one of your videos.
Oh, cool.
And I had a little mantra like, what would George do?
We'd probably plant some 53B in there.
Yeah. Try
But,
to burn.
but like you said, thinking about the plants and the whole composition and everything, it got me towards gearing towards doing a aquascape like that versus like just sticking a whole bunch of plants that you think might look good.
Yeah, just randomly.
Yeah, randomly. So I actually did that, and I mean I have a cool scape now, but I'm about to redo it with the even better kind of like layout. So I draw my layout now.
Awesome. You plan them, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really good lesson. So, plan your layout. You know, you might want to copy someone's layout. There's nothing wrong with copying. You might be inspired by, I don't know, you might have gone for a walk in the woods or the mountains. You might have seen something. It might just be a tiny little thing, or it could be a whole landscape. And you might be inspired by that, and then you can plan your layout accordingly. Sketching is a really good idea. Definitely coming out with a plant list, and
Just thinking about the way they grow.
yeah, so plants grow at different rates, they grow to different sizes. Do your research. The Tropica website is very good. It has each species laid out, you know, how difficult it is, how fast it grows, how big it grows, and then think about this when you're creating and planning your layout. I guess on a deeper level with aquascaping, think about the story you want to tell with it. You know, what are you trying to achieve? What do you want to feel about the aquascape? You know, do you want it to be super high impact, loads of colours, loads of texture, or do you want it to be kind of more subtle and more kind of understated beauty? So, you know, just kind of think about these things rather than just, you know, like Debbie said, you know, don't just plant the plants willy-nilly, randomly. Unless you're very lucky, it's not going to look particularly good.
You will not like it.
Yeah.
In the long run, you'll be like, oh, that was a hot
That sucks.
mess.
Yeah, am I right?
You're right. You're right, man. Then you spent all that money.
You spent all that money and you just have a rubbish aquascape.
Don't need a lot of wine to clear that up.
Oh look, we're on telly, Debbie. Look.
Take the lane.
I only just realised. I was in the zone.
I've been trying not to like look at that.
Sorry, mate. Just triggered you.
Thank you, boy.
You aqua shadow then this weekend?
Yes, man. Cannot. Oh, are you and Joey actually doing the whole versus
Joey-
Aquascaping?
Joey versus the Royal thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of emceeing it. Yeah, so I'm not actually competing, thank goodness, because there's some real skilled
That is cool.
people there.
I love watching those. Like I was talking with one gentleman here not too long ago. Like this is kind of like a once in a time of like, you know, it's like a vacay type thing. It's like, you know, you're in a position, you got a little money to play with, and you're like, what do you do with it? Where do you want to go? And then next thing you know, I heard Joey saying, Aquascaping's coming up. I'm like,
Oh,
that's it.
there you go.
Yeah, so here we are, and I
There we
mean,
are.
like, I threw this together like so quickly, but
Yeah.
when I got here, I would not expect to think that you guys would be here so quickly, and I'm like, dude, there is freaking Rob. And I'm like, what? Then I see a sign that says you're coming upstairs to do this. I'm like, whoa! I was just about to go to bed. I was like, so I'm like, oh man, we gotta go, baby, we gotta go.
I'm gonna go and sit down and eat it.
My wife was just like, come on up here.
Come on up. And here you are, planting an aquascape.
As soon as you said, do you want volunteers? I'm just like,
Straight there.
If you guys wanted to collaborate again, I could see buying a What Would George Do shirt. I mean, I need that.
There you go. What would George do?
sit back and like, what would that guy do? No, do. I really love all your videos.
Thanks, man.
Like you actually give a lot of knowledge. You give a lot of like insight on how to do this stuff. Like
I think it's trying to make it accessible to people because a lot of people get almost intimidated when they see like a really like intricate, nice aquascape. It can be a little bit intimidating for a beginner. So I just like to kind of break it down into easy to understand sort of bite-sized chunks. And I think I kind of developed this I did a lot of writing for Practical Fish Keeping. I did a lot of step-by-step articles. Yeah, just to take the photo, you know, step by step. And this, you know, this was really helpful in.
And you know, I think it's the voice, man. The voice kind of calms you down.
That's kind of weird.
No, my wife, when we came in, you started talking, he was like, oh man, he has an accent. I was like, yay. I was like, what were you anyway, my bad.
I do get some like trolls on YouTube. I don't know if there's any watching right now. Hello. They go, I hate your accent. You're stupid. Are you from Germany?
No.
Nein, du bist ein Pimmelkopf. I'm not going to translate that. I've got children, peasants. I'll tell you later, Zachary.
Thank you. Thank you. I know none.
I used to live in, fun fact, I used to live in Germany. My dad was in the army. I used to live in Germany for 6 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Never knew it. Yeah, it's every day's a school day.
Yeah. I like that. Every day. Dude, that is a shirt.
Yeah.
That is a legit shirt.
Legit.
Every day
Day's
is
school
a
day.
school day. Dang. I'm trying not to blush a little bit. Got a grown man up here.
Looking good, nice and dense. This is what we like. So a really good learning point actually, that the heavier we plant at the beginning, the less likely we're going to run into algae issues. If you think about algae and plants always in competition with each other, the more plants we have, the healthier those plants are, the less likely we're going to get algae. But that also needs to be coupled with appropriate maintenance practice. So especially in the early days of an aquascape's life, we really need to be doing these large, frequent water changes. So for instance, in this scape here, I would personally be doing at least a 50% water change every day for the first week, and then every other day for the second week, and then every third day for the third week, and then after week 4 you can go to 50% water change a week. But ideally, I mean, if you've got all the equipment there, you've got all the water change kit, and you've got the time, there's no harm in doing an even bigger water change, in my personal opinion and experience. The water change is diluting these waste organics that are being produced by the plants, by the fish, by the bacteria, by all the metabolic processes that are going on in that aquarium. They're producing organic waste. If this organic waste is allowed to accumulate, then this is going to result in algae issues, basically. So the best way we can mitigate against this is with a large water change. There are other techniques out there, other methodologies, which rely on, some people don't do water changes at all. They rely purely on the plant growth to manage the water quality. But when we're using CO2 injection, we're using high levels of light, high levels of nutrients, we're going to get really fast plant growth. And I would personally recommend, a larger water change. We're nearly there, Zebedee, aren't we?
Yes. It's like, oh my gosh, I see another plant.
Yeah.
Is that tissue culture or is that?
This is UNS tissue cultured Eleocharis parvula mini.
How many pots?
How many pots
is
did
that?
we use? Where's Jen?
Three.
Only 3.
That's a lot. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good.
Alright.
It's worth talking about. Okay. It's worth talking about tissue culture. So for those that don't know, tissue culture means the plant comes in a. Have we got any available to show? Yeah. Yeah. Comes in a cup, plastic cup. It's been grown in laboratory conditions. Means it's going to be guaranteed to be free from algae, pesticides, disease, snails. And it comes with this like agar jelly here, which is the material that the plants actually grow in. And generally speaking, you get a lot more quantity for your money. They might be much smaller because of the way they've been grown. They're grown from tiny, tiny babies. And you just a more, a denser plant mass in there. So you can normally get 5 to 10 times as many plants in a tissue culture cup versus a regular pot. So, although they look smaller, they are smaller, physically smaller, you get more quantity. So they usually represent much better value for money than a regular pot. They also transport easily. So I know in the US, obviously it's a very large country, and depending on where you're buying your plants from, if you're buying mail order, it might take a few days to get to you. If you're buying a regular pot, especially if it's in its submerged form, underwater form, it can really suffer in this transit. So by buying the tissue culture cup, you're much more likely going to have a healthy plant by the time it gets to you. Okay, last one. Should we do one more each? I was going to go for that.
Sorry. It's tightened.
Okay, good. Right, round of applause for Zebedee, everyone. Okay, we're going to move back now. We explained earlier we plant foreground, moving towards the midground, then the background. I think, where's UNS? What's this one called? Get your glasses on. It's when did TI?
Indo brown.
Endo brown. How big will it get?
Same size as the usual MDI.
Okay, so sort of 6 inches or so. Okay, so good background plant, midground. You can see that it's actually quite dense. That you could you could split that into even more portions. So how many pots of this did we use? 3. So you could get 100 plants if you split them up enough. So they represent really good value for money, but it does show you need to look into it. So that looks really small. Some people might put that in the foreground because it is super small, but it's going to grow to kind of this tall. So do bear this in mind. Do your research. So I'm just going to pop that behind the Iliacaris and behind the Dragonstone. Any volunteers? Zebedee, put your hand down. Yeah, go on there.
Is there any hints for to be a pot or the cup versus buying it normal and planting it?
Any
hints? I bought some for a cup and it just did not work out very well for establishment versus buying a more established plant. Anything you need to be careful of?
Yeah, I mean, if it's, a lot of it depends on how long that tissue culture cup's been in the store. So if it's come from the supplier and it's been waiting in the store for several weeks, which sometimes it can do, it's slowly kind of dying, basically, unless it's been kept in ideal conditions. So you may have bought it towards the end of its sort of useful life. So this is a great learning point. Strike up a friendship, a relationship with your local retailer, if you hopefully you have one. I know some of you may not. And ask when they get their shipment of plants in and get it as fresh as you can. Okay. This is a really important thing. I'm very lucky in the UK where we have access to really fresh plants all the time just because of the logistical nature of how things work. I know in the US it can be a bit different, but do try to find out, how long that plant's been on the shelf for. Another interesting point is plants often are grown out of water in the nurseries. Okay, we call this normally emergent growth, and this kind of mimics nature. In nature, most aquatic plants prefer to grow out of water because they have more access to CO2 in the air, they have more access to light. They're going to be physically more robust because they have to support their own body weight. Okay. They're going to be easier to ship because they're more robust, but a lot of people will have trouble when that plant makes that transition from its out of water growth form to its underwater growth. So if you bought that out of water growth plant and it's relatively old, it's been in the store for a while, or it's just started to go through that change from out of water to underwater, this is a real kind of sensitive stage in that plant's life. So if you're kind of unlucky and you bought that plant at that point in time, then you know quite likely not going to succeed with it, no matter how good your conditions are. So this is another important point. So ask your retailer, no, when do you get your next shipment of plants? Get them as soon as you can. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we need to have a permit to bring a tissue culture plant from outside the US?
No, not tissue culture. Is that right, Mike?
Correct.
Yeah.
Get them at the shows. They're always fresh at the shows.
There you go. What's your name, sir?
Grant.
Nice to meet you. George.
Oh, are we going over?
Let's go swim in the middle between here. We've met before.
Yeah, you helped my son scape in Chicago. No. I think it was Jersey first, or
Yes.
Chicago first.
Aquatic experience.
It might have been
Jersey?
Chicago and then Jersey last year too.
There you go.
We met a couple times.
Yeah, I thought I recognised you. How's your son doing?
Good, I decided to leave him at home this time.
He's only 3.
No, he's 7. He can take care of himself.
That's all right.
And his 4-year-old sister.
He's got PS4.
5
Got an Xbox.
Xbox One. Yeah, he's good.
Nice. Standard.
He'll take care of my 140 tanks at home.
You have 140 tanks?
Yeah, all shrimp.
Oh my god. Are you entering the shrimp contest?
8 categories.
8 categories, is that all?
I think I won 7 in Texas.
Just showing off now. Well done, mate. Love shrimp. Is it near Carradina or Carradina?
So the Neos are outside my 12 ponds. I got 144 Carradina tanks.
This guy. Why is shrimp from you? Are you a
GOEshrimp.com.
There you go. Sponsored by.
Could lend me a finger?
Yeah, sure.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Indeed it does. There you are. I've got it. Okay.
Yeah, my own.
Sort it. So the great thing about crypts is that they don't need CO2 injection. They don't need a lot of light. They can be shaded, obviously. They're generally a slow grower, so they're ideal for a low maintenance setup. And there's loads of different varieties out there. Commonly available, I know in Europe there's probably about 20 varieties. Everything from a crypt parva, which is one of the smallest, all the way to like a balancei, which can grow, several feet long, and everything in between. All kinds of colours as well. And depending on the growth conditions, will depend on almost how that plant will look. They can produce different colours, kind of different textures, depending on the growth conditions. So it's a really great plant, really versatile, and ideal for beginners and experts alike. Good. Okay. Thanks. Let's give this man a hand. No, we don't send them to last. Let's go.
But you will want
Oh, we want them, yeah. Drama fair.
I
Of course I want
guess
them.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to move on to another crypt, a bigger crypt. Is this Petri? Yes, you say yes.
We'll say yes.
You say with confidence and everyone will
Yes.
believe you. Definitely Cryptocoryne Petri. So, going to get slightly taller than the Wendtii. And again, you can split this as a regular pot. You can see obviously it's a lot bigger, but actually there's nowhere near as many plants there as there was in one of those little portions as earlier. So it gives you an idea of the difference. A beginner might think that's better value for money, but actually the tissue culture will be, because you've got more of them. Hopefully it will grow. That will grow probably similar size to that. Just take obviously a lot longer to get to that size. Okay. So we can actually split that up if we want to get more economical coverage. We can be quite brutal with it, just spilling water all over the carpet. And we can get at least 3 portions out of that. I'm going to put it on this beautiful Biomaster box there. Yeah, do a bit more. So you can be a bit more lazy. You don't have to necessarily use tweezers with plants like this. You could use your fingers, just push it in. Again, you don't have to push it all the way in, as long as those roots are covered by the soil, enough to anchor the plant, and enough for those grains to be in contact with the roots to provide nutrients as well. So this is what I call a classic George Farmer layout. Crypts, Java fern, we're going to use some Anubias. Got some Bucopalandra as well?
Yes.
Yeah, nice.
There you go.
I do like a hair grass foreground as well. Forms a nice tight carpet, especially with this light. Very much. I think we're good for now. Thanks, Jim. Ooh. Cut. I'm so tired. I'm still on UK time, so what is it? 3 in the morning. 4 in the morning?
When did you get in?
I actually got in, actually flew in Wednesday, but I still haven't adjusted. And then I go back home, spend the week in Denmark, and then I come back to Aquatic Experience in New Jersey. So my body clock is going to be really happy with me. This is another variety of crypts. It's a Wendy TI, I'm going to say. Any crypt experts out there? Yeah? Where's Baden? I bet Baden.
Joanne, maybe?
No one knows. Okay, I'm just going to call it Cryptocoryne Wendy TI.
George Farmer.
George. Funker. That's a joke from earlier. So, beautiful crypt. Those beautiful purple stems there. No idea what species it is. I'm just being honest.
That's a good thing.
I think it's going to look beautiful though. Never have enough crypts, can you? The great thing about crypts is a lot of them don't send out runners, so it will just produce new leaves, and it will just gradually get kind of more and more dense, and just fill out the scape really slowly. It could be months and months before you need to sort of trim it or thin it out or anything. It's one of the reasons I really like crypts, because I'm really lazy. Oh, that's going to float, isn't it? Try and lock it in a bit. I'm not going to
That's
Has everyone bought raffle tickets to want to win this?
Yes.
Americans get so excited.
Yeah, decide where I'm gonna put it.
Does it come with a red colander?
No. Keep your hands off my colander.
Bring it?
I did bring it, where is it? And I do want to cheer. Okay, it's taking shape, isn't it? Happy. Okay, time to move on to. Got some background stones? Oh, here. I do apologise. What is this Rotundifolia?
Species pink.
Species pink. Oh, here we go. Oh, another big here. Native to America. So we've got 6 or so stems out. We're going to separate that into 2 groups of 3, just to make it a little bit more economical. And we can bunch those up into one kind of bigger bunch. Put it in between your tweezers. And then because this is submerged growth, or is that submerged?
It's submerged.
It is submerged, is it?
Got really
What is it, refins?
No, that's, it's retardant.
This isn't retardant.
It's on the Wicca.
Oh, that's,
This is the-
Logo.
is that the immersed one?
I think it's, yeah. It's starting to
I think it's one.
Yeah, that's,
the archaeologics.
that's from here.
That's what, yeah, that's what I think.
Anyway, whatever this is, it's beautiful. Let's pop it towards the centre because it has a red colour to it, so it's going to act as like a focal point plant. And that's a really important point. When you're using red, you kind of want to use it carefully. You don't necessarily want to use it towards the edge of the tank because it's going to kind of draw your eye to the left or the right. So we tend to use that, again, in accordance with maybe the rule of thirds, or you could have it directly central. But just bear in mind, high impact colours will draw your eye, so bear in mind where you put them. Ooh. So biggest tank I've ever scaped, some of you may have seen it, 28,000 litre or 7,500 gallon for a German zoo. And smallest tank, those mini complete tanks, have you seen them? They're like this big. And yeah, everything in between. But the Hardscaping project, the German zoo project, was just amazing. Has anyone seen the video?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
If not, why not? Woo!
How long did it take?
The whole process took several months because they created the Hardscape from kind of concrete resin. So that was done by an external company. And then the actual scaping itself of the planting took 4 of us a couple of days. And I went back for a revisit a month or so ago after about 3 or 4 months of growth. Did an update film. Hopefully you've seen it. Very soon. Is this Bacopa? Sorry? Don't worry about them, they look good. Water leaves, that's a good one. Is this Wallachii? Not asking Bailey. So it looks really pretty poor at the moment, but when the tank's full of water, these kind of leaves are going to spread and look much more beautiful. I'm actually going to mix this up with the Ludwigia just to create a more complex kind of texture. And this can be quite a nice technique with stem plants. You don't necessarily have to plant in groups, which can look quite formal. You can mix it up a bit. But whoever takes over this tank, the lucky winner, feel free to make some adjustments if that's what you want to do. It would be great if whoever wins it, if they've got Instagram or whatever, if they do updates on it, this would be really nice. Everyone can see the kind of progress, share the love.
So you're not a big fan of too much red, are you?
No.
Yeah.
I don't use much red, and I tend not to run really high light either. So most red plants, not all red plants, tend to prefer higher levels of lighting. And because I do work away a lot, do a lot of travelling to America. Woo! Yeah, I haven't got the they require a lot of maintenance, and I don't have the time. So this is why I tend to use a lot of epiphyte plants, which are low maintenance, crypts. You know the score.
What do you think the proper ratio is? I mean, do you think there's like
A ratio of red to green?
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on your taste. It's all a matter of taste. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. There's kind of guidelines, and some people call them rules.
Yeah.
But the great thing about the nature aquarium is that there is no real kind of formal rules. There's like compositional guidelines. There's trends, but there's no real rules. Conversely, if you looked at the Dutch style, the Dutch style of aquascaping or Dutch aquariums, this was like invented in like the 1930s by the NBAT, and it's from the Netherlands. And it was a really super formal way of judging contests. Judges used to go to people's homes, they used to look at their aquariums, and they used to have like a real marking guide. he even used to like mark them and how tidy their cables were, you know, and really kind of you know, rigid and quite kind of restricting for creativity, which in my opinion isn't the best thing when you're trying to create something that's natural and beautiful. You want to kind of just use your own kind of sensitivity, you know, your own tastes. It's your thing that you need to enjoy for yourself, and you might like loads of red, which is fine. And no one, you know, no one can argue with how you enjoy how you look at something. So that's an important lesson. Okay, in the plant towards the edges now, I'm going to use. I definitely want to whoop for this. Hydrophilus siamensis 53B.
What's the common name?
That is the common name.
Any easier name? I don't know.
53B. It's a really, that's another good learning point. I like you because you make me use those as learning points. So, scientific names, I tend to prefer to use scientific names with plants because there's lots of ambiguity if you use a common name. Pearlweed, does everyone know, I guess, knows what that is. But to me, that's just like, just doesn't make sense. So you can definitely identify a plant when you use a scientific name. If you use them consistently and regularly, they just become second nature. So I would always recommend using the scientific name if you can.
Pronouncing them is often a difficult thing.
Pronouncing, yeah, that's right. I mean, in my experience, if you just say it with confidence and no one questions it, so I've got away with it so far.
Just the accent.
Just the accent, yeah. Stupid accent. Are you German? Sorry.
Make me feel bad.
It's making me feel good. I feel bad. It's wild out there.
It's pretty normal for Chicago.
Yeah. You guys have it really cold in the winter, don't you? Yeah. Worse than England.
It's an understatement.
Cold in the winter, hot in the summer, the rest is
Yeah. Do you guys get really sad in the winter? That's why you need an aquascape. Nice and bright. Get all that light in you. Okay, let's go again. Ah, yes, that's true. Although yesterday was a beautiful day. It was beautiful.
Well, I meant in clothing.
Ah, right, yeah, okay, got you. Okay. How many people have got watching?
1:30.
Smash that like button. Hooray! That's good. I can't open it, I've got any more in. Okay, so we're planted really densely in the background. These are fast-growing weeds, basically. This is a really good idea in a new tank where algae is particularly risky. So, like I said earlier, the heavier we plant, the healthier those plants are, the less chance of algae we get. So if we plant with fast-growing plants, this is going to help outcompete the algae, basically. So super dense in the back, we could probably fit a couple more. Now, you don't get the impact at the moment because there's no water in the tank. We've got some submerged plants, so as I said earlier, plants will come either in the underwater form or the out of water form. The submerged form here, the underwater, are really super floppy, but if we did have water in there, that would be up here, so we'd have a nice background. Unfortunately, we won't be seeing that today because we're not going to fill with water. But rest assured, whoever wins the tank will be rewarded with a beautiful, full background. Okay, let's have a bit of a spray. Yeah, underwater plants will require more spraying like this because they've adapted to underwater and they will dry out relatively quickly, whereas out of water growth plants, emerged plants, don't need spraying so much. Top tip for you. Okay, now we're ready for epiphyte plants. Epiphyte plants are plants that either need to be or like to be patched to the decor. So we can either glue them, we can wedge them, we can tie them on with string, cable ties, any. I'm really lazy and I just like to just poke them in. And we've got some great wood here, we've got some kind of crossovers of the twigs, etc., where we can just literally insert our plants. So I'll start off around the front here, and I'm going to use some Anubias petites. This is from Tropica. And this actually does really well in the shades. Anubias is a very low light tolerant plant, and if you do give it too much light, it will tend to encourage algae growth on the leaves because it is slow growing and it doesn't have this capability necessarily to fight off the algae. So it's a great idea to kind of plant it in the shade, and eventually this is going to be covered with Java ferns. So that's where I'm putting it there. The Java fern will come over the top, and I know that Anubias will be absolutely fine in that shade. You could actually split this up even more if you wanted to, but I want to create instant impact, so I'm going to keep it in quite a large kind of portion. So I'm just poking it in the gaps there. What will happen is over the next few weeks or so, those roots are going to self-attach and be nice and secure without any risk of them floating away. Oh, quiet, haven't I? I'm in the zone, sorry. In the Anubias zone.
That's the winner for the 100,000 subscriber.
No, not yet. I honestly haven't had the time because I need to dedicate like a full day at home to host someone to do the giveaway. So thanks for reminding me. just triggered me.
Just another dark.
Thanks, mate.
Here's my dog.
I write my book, got to do the giveaway. Yeah, it was. Book's doing alright. Yeah, deadline's approaching. Still a little bit to do. Hope the publishers aren't watching. Okay, I think we're nearly as much as we can. We could potentially pop a little bit. This is quite a cool technique. So the Dragonstone's got like a nice little kind of gouge here. We can just pop that in there. Gives it a nice little natural touch.
So you put it right in the stone without it going into the soil?
Yeah, as long as the rhizome, so that's a really good learning point, thank you. So the rhizome here, the rhizome there, that's where you see that fleshy portion, where the leaf protrudes from. That's called the rhizome. That needs to be exposed to water, oxygen, circulating water. If that gets buried, then it will die off, basically. The roots can actually go into the soil and they'll get food, but better safe than sorry and keep the whole thing away from the soil. But I mean, a couple here, this one here, the roots might actually go down into the soil and get more nutrients. This is a technique that some people use, but you absolutely do need to get that rhizome out of the substrate. What happens is if you bury the rhizome, it goes anaerobic, which means lack of oxygen, and then it will die off. Right, can we fit one more in? Michelangelo might not need that. Okay, is this narrow form? Yeah. Beautiful. Is this submerged form?
Yes.
Yeah?
Is that
Is this UNS?
Cocomet's not.
Is it immersed?
It's immersed.
Okay, cool. So Microsora narrow or narrow form leaf Java fern, classic, one of my favourite plants of all time. Creates instant impact, instant focal points, adds a sense of maturity right away. Ooh. God agree. And you can just literally wedge it in again. Something to bear in mind with especially with the emergent out of water. That's a nice one. Java fern, when it's been grown out of water, the leaves might go through transition. They might kind of, some of them might die off, and you should get new growth relatively quickly. But don't be afraid, don't be scared if you start to see a little bit of kind of die off. Hopefully, in good growth conditions, you'll get the new growth quite quickly. Trident fern is one of my favourites. It's labelled as an easy category plant, but in my experience, trident fern is actually, I would say, a medium category, and definitely does do better with high levels of light and CO2. All the plants we're using here today will definitely will thrive in this setup, but I would strongly recommend CO2 injection. Is there a CO2 injection kit supplied with this?
There's a regulator.
Just the regulator, so they need a cylinder? Okay. I would definitely recommend CO2 because we're using such a strong light. Is this 90 watts? 92.
That's embarrassing.
Embarrassing.
Come on, George.
School wearer. Do your research, farmer.
So you're just wedging them in there?
Yeah, just wedging them in, and then over the next few weeks or so, those roots are going to creep over the wood and all the rocks.
And they won't float when you add the water?
Don't care. If they do, just wedge them back again. Simple. So you could, if I had more time and I wasn't so exhausted, I might time them on.
Put some weights on them so they can.
Yeah, that's looking Start to lose, yeah. Close to the edge. I'm not even drinking. Should be. Good job our main sponsors aren't here, isn't it? That looks rubbish, but definitely I'm losing it. Yeah, I'll do some of that in a minute. Okay, Bucophalandra, I'm not sure what species this is. Godzilla. What a great name. I think it's bad as the people that name those corals. Like, any reed keepers here? Yeah? What's the craziest coral name you've heard?
Probably not safe to on social media.
Not children's face?
No, it's not.
What letter does it begin with?
PB. 2 words.
Ah. That's disgusting.
I know.
No idea what you're talking about.
Yep.
Bucophalandra, endemic to Borneo. It's the only place it will grow naturally. But thankfully now there are responsible farms, nurseries that will obviously produce it, from a less environmentally impactful way. But I would strongly recommend not buying wild harvested Bucophalandra because you're kind of encouraging the irresponsible collection and the potential destruction of some of the forests in Borneo.
How do you know? How do you know if it's been...
You don't. You just buy it from a reputable retailer. Yeah. Tissue culture, yeah. Not some dodgy guy off Facebook. Yeah. There's a bin bag full of it. Yeah. We've got some Opsinatra. No. Okay, Java fern is one of those plants that is very susceptible to drying out, so I do need to spray it. Java fern, bulbitis, echinodorus, these are some of the more sensitive plants to drying out. So when you are doing this at home, if you do this style of planting, then do bear in mind, if you do let it dry out too much, it can die quite quickly. Okay, we're nearly there. Woo! Wait, whether to put moss in it. Hands up who thinks I should put moss in there. Woo! Hands up who I shouldn't put moss in there. Yes, no moss wins. I'll put a little bit in just to show you as a learning point, because we are in an educational environment right now. Ah, cool. Where's this from? Where from, do we know? Anyone knows? Joanne? What's your name, sir?
Nate.
Nate, thank you very much. Round of applause to Nate. He supplied some beautiful mini Christmas moss. Is this merged? Is that, I don't know. It could be growing underwater or out of.
Very low tech.
It's a merge. Wow, it looks super healthy. Okay, so top tip, really easy way to attach moss is to use glue. It needs to be cyanoacrylate, which is non-toxic to livestock, and ideally you want to use the gel type. If we use the liquid type, especially on a vertical surface, it tends to run down and leave a white mark. So we use as little as possible. You only need a tiny amount. And I tend to use the glue in crevices, or where there's two prongs of wood. It makes it easy to put the glue in there, and it's also kind of like a natural place where moss might grow as well. So just a tiny splodge there, and then you don't want to use a massive clump. What can happen is if you use too big a clump, the moss on top will grow really nicely, but the moss underneath will be starved and die off. So you only use a tiny thin layer, if that makes sense. Okay, there is a little bit of white showing there, but after some time the mosses are going to overgrow that white mark, so it should look quite nice. Okay, let's put a little bit more over here. This looks a little bit bare on here, so let's put a bit, more like that. Put a bit on here. It's quite runny, this, for a gel type. Is that right? Do you need to shake it?
Yeah, you do.
Every day's a school day. Can't see that right now, but eventually that's going to kind of grow over the wood and look really natural. Moss is really great for helping kind of achieve this ancient, kind of mature look, which you can achieve obviously in a brand new scape if you use enough of it. No comment. Laughing at. I put the glue there. Anybody want to have a go at gluing some moss? Round of applause. You've got to use all of that. Okay, you happy?
Yes.
Yes? Good luck. No one's watching. Okay, so remember just a tiny thin layer. Put a little blob on think about where you want to go, like the area where it's most kind of wanting, most empty maybe. What's your name?
Raquel.
Raquel?
Yeah.
Round of applause to Raquel.
Are you still a Kessel fan?
Sorry?
Still like Kessel, lighting?
Kessel, yeah, I like Kessel. I've got the 360X at home. Nice. Expensive though. But these are very good also. Classy. Very better than me. ASMR. There you go, Raquel. Okay, done this before?
Yes.
So,
It's really fun.
have you got some raffle tickets for this?
I don't.
Ooh, that's embarrassing. Get off. You're going to get some.
Gonna offer her.
I think 3 raffle tickets for helpers, yeah? I bet everybody agrees. And Grant, yeah. I bought some too, that'd be awkward if I won, wouldn't it?
Raquel's a great member of the Chicago Aquatic Plant Society.
What's your least favorite plant to work with?
Utricularia grandifolium.
Otherwise known as.
UG. There isn't a common name for it. I know what you're thinking. It's a bladderwort. Has anyone not heard of Utricularia? It's a carpeting plant. It's actually a carnivorous, and I've tried it probably 8 or 9 times, and I've always failed. It's the only plant I've failed to grow. Anyone succeeded with it?
Well, it depends on if you want to.
Get out. You've grown it in a filter? Oh, okay. It's got no roots, isn't it? No real root structure. Yeah. Are you happy? You want to keep going? Go for it. I'm going to go and sit down for a bit. That's great. Round of applause for Raquel. You want to do a bit more? You want to do a bit more? You do a bit more. Good point. If you're not satisfied, keep going. The faster he is. Oh, got to use all of it.
Okay, now it's good.
Okay. Another round of applause for Okay, that's planting complete.
Woo!
I agree with you. Classic layout. Not anyone can. Hopefully, anyone can see. Everyone can see how I did that. Quite a simple process. Soil, hardscape, foreground, midground, background, epiphyte plants. It's a very basic process that I tend to always go through on my scapes, and it's no surprise that my scapes always have a kind of similar style because I always go through this process. I often use similar plants, and I make no apology for that. You know, a lot of people say, oh, you know, why don't you do a contest tank? Why don't you do diorama? Why don't you do this? Da da da. Well, my passion is to kind of promote aquascaping, and to do that, I think it's important to make it accessible, easy to understand, but still quite beautiful. And hopefully I've achieved that this evening. So I really hope you enjoyed that. I think we're going to move on to some Q&A. Is that right? Does anyone kind of chairing this, or do I just go freestyle? Freestyle. Okay. Okay. Hands up, and I'll just call someone at random. So anyone who wants a question, put your hand up, and I'll point at you. Any question? Melanie.
So one question you kind of answered. My one question was, do you feel like it's okay to use as many different plants with as many different textures, or do you feel like there should be a limit to how many different plants?
I think it depends on what you want to achieve. If you have like, I think it's important to have an end vision in mind, and whatever you need to do to execute that end vision, and that could be just one plant, or it could be 40 species. But it's important to have that end, the story you want to tell, and that end kind of mission and that theme. So there isn't a right or wrong answer. This is the beauty of the nature aquarium, because nature doesn't necessarily have those kind of set rules. So
With that light, would that be considered high light?
absolutely. Yeah, it's 92 watts over about 80 litres. So you're looking at over 1 watt per litre. With LED, it's a lot of light. You could hang it higher, which is going to give less light to the aquarium. Is there any dimming capability?
No dimming capability.
Just on or off?
On or off, but if you have it at an average height of 18 inches or higher, it's okay.
It's okay.
Yes,
It's okay.
fine. As long as the CO2 levels are good.
Yeah. But it's regarded as high light. Definitely need CO2. Definitely need to keep your water on top of your water changes, fertilisation regime, good levels of circulation. Basically, it's a high-tech setup. Next question, Adam.
I've heard that plant tanks kind of have an expiration date, where you're talking about the soil runs out of nutrients, and you can use in ones. Do you recommend any like capsules?
Root tabs?
Root tabs.
Of course. Tropica root capsules. Yeah, absolutely. In all seriousness, any root capsule with a good kind of balance of nutrients would be ideal. Some people go kind of DIY with Osmo coat, which you can buy at places like Home Depot. Don't I sound American? But like I said earlier, I don't know if you were there from the beginning, but the plants will adapt to take nutrients through the water as well. So it's important to use a good quality liquid fertiliser. The substrate ideally will contain nutrients and feed the plant roots, but arguably, and in fact, it's not even arguably, you can grow plants in an inert substrate. So, but always better to use a decent quality soil or other nutrient-rich substrate system. You want to almost spoil the plants. You want to give them more than they need. You want to give them nutrients through the roots and through the leaves, and they're going to reward you with really healthy growth, and that's going to reward you with less algae growth. Next. So.
From a judge's perspective, you don't like to take points off for having to give 2 different types of crypts or 2 different types of high growth?
No, not unless it was something like a Dutch style where they've not been used appropriately. But with Nature Aquarium, you're not judging on necessarily the plant choice and the plant texture and all those individual components. For me personally as a judge, I'm judging on the overall impression and that story that's being told, and the composition and just the overall, just the feeling that it gives me. You know.
So you don't really feel like it's frowned upon anywhere in the hobby or anything like that?
No, I don't. Not in modern aquascaping competitions. Not in my experience.
Not even like 2 different Java firms?
No. It's like if they look good, they look good. Yeah.
So, still a firm believer in heavy fertilizing. I know that's kind of been I'm watching your videos. That was a big push from you. Was that you like to fertilize on the high side, basically. Yeah. Do you still use? You kind of help develop a fertilizer. Do you still use your own fertilizer, or do you have a topic? I'm trying to put you on a spot. I've seen some both.
I helped develop the Evolution Aqua brand, the Aquascape complete liquid plant food.
Yeah.
It's a great product. It works, but so does Tropica Specialized, so does Thrive, so does EI. They're all basically the same thing. They're all elements that are mixed in water that feed the plants. Some have a different ratio of nutrients. Some are more expensive than others, but they all perform basically the same way. I try not to get overly obsessed about buy what you can afford, buy what's available, and buy what works well, basically. So,
Jordan, can you repeat the questions?
oh, yes, certainly.
Do you have any thoughts about the amount of algae growth you get from an inert substrate versus one of these?
So the question was, do I have any thoughts on algae growth versus an inert substrate versus a nutrient-rich substrate? No. No, sorry, I was just trying to be funny. It doesn't really matter. It's all about the plant health. So if you're going to encourage healthier plants with a good quality substrate, then you're less likely to get algae. But if you can promote really healthy plant growth with an inert substrate by using really good quality liquid fertilizers, good circulation, and all the other good stuff, then the algae growth again is going to be minimised. So it's all about, don't think about what the individual components are going to contribute to algae. Think about how the plant growth is going to affect the algae. It's all about the plant growth, and you know, the amount of plant growth and the quality of that plant growth, that's the biggest influence on the algae growth, in my experience. Debbie?
I was thinking on my next Aquascape, and it's like how likely are you to do it? So I've seen on YouTube that some really big aquascapers, what they'll do first is like they'll have that setup that you have there, but they'll actually grow the roots first, immersed.
Dry start.
Exactly.
The dry start method.
To get the plants like.
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, I get asked that a lot.
So how likely are you to do that, or have you ever done it?
I have done dry start method. I was one of the first, I think, especially in the UK, to use the yogurt blend with moss dry start. My opinion is if you're going to invest the money in the plants and all the equipment and everything, the filter, blah blah blah, then you might as well enjoy it as an aquascape, aqua with water. If you're limited, if you maybe not have the budget for a good filter, or you've got a very limited quantity of plants and you don't want to run the risk of algae, then the dry start method may be right for you. But my suggestion is invest in good quality equipment, good quality plants, fill it straight away and enjoy the aquascape. Do the maintenance, get used to the maintenance and just enjoy it. But the dry start, you know, there's nothing wrong with the dry start method. That's just the kind of the method
I just thought it was a more a preventative for algae startup to get them started quickly, so that when you do fill it up, you know,
yeah. It's a tricky one. I mean, I know what you're saying. It's a tricky one. Let's say you've got a new Agumi, you've just got like 3 rocks in there, and you wanted to do a full carpet of Monte Carlo. You know, you've got 1 pot. You know, it might be an idea to split that up, plant dry, because you haven't got that biomass to fight off the algae if it's filled with water. So this could be a good example of dry start method. And as I just said earlier about the moss method, a really nice way to get really kind of intricate and nice tight moss growth is by kind of chopping it up really finely or putting it in a blender with a little bit of yogurt, some RO water or rainwater, and then paint it on the areas that you want to grow. Do dry start there, and then that moss is going to attach itself really kind of efficiently, and then you'll get really nice kind of dense, compact moss growth. Anyone over here? I'm kind of ignoring you guys, sorry. Yes, David?
How many aquascapes do you think you do a year between, like, not just personal aquascapes, but stuff you do when doing demos and educational experiences? How many can you do a year?
7,943.
Wow.
On average, I think I do 1 a week.
So about 50.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm still rubbish. It would be better by now, wouldn't it?
Yes.
So.
Any suggestions for a peninsula style tank?
In terms of aquascape?
Yeah.
Yeah, not obviously, but you want to be viewing the tank from 3 sides. So if let's say this is peninsula, we're viewing it from this end here, you probably have the majority of the hardscape around the centre, and then just use foreground plants around the edge. So copy this kind of thing, foreground and then midground, and then the background would kind of be in the centre of the aquarium. That's the kind of basic idea. Yeah.
That's pretty good on this side.
John, have you got a question? I thought you were just pointing at me.
Last time we talked, you were working on presenting aquascaping to. I apologize, I don't know the name, but it was a very big garden show.
Oh yes.
In the UK. Did that go anywhere? Is that still a professional?
Yeah, I presented. I did an aquascape, a couple of aquascapes for the Royal Horticultural Society Urban Garden Show, which is like a prerequisite to the Chelsea Flower Show, which is like a real big deal. The Queen goes and stuff like this. On the back of that, I didn't really have any kind of direct leads, but I did have people approach me for podcasts on aquascaping, for gardening podcasts. So our aquascaping is starting to, transition from just the aquatic world into the terrestrial world with gardening. So it's going in the right direction. It's maybe not going as quickly as we might hope. I think the general perception of the aquarium hobby as a general thing is it's still quite like a hobby where you're either really into it or your Joe blogs, you're kind of general public and you buy one and you just let the algae gets, they can't be asked to maintain it and it gets stinky, and then you've kind of lost them to the hobby forever, which is a really bad thing. So it's going the right way. But I kind of like to view aquascaping almost in a completely different genre to the aquarium hobby, because what we're working with is art. It's a 3D living art form. It is an aquarium. The aquarium just happens to be the canvas. Yeah, sorry, I'm rambling. I'm good at that. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
You ever skate a pond?
No.
I think it'd be really cool if you and Lonnie Don did something together.
Would be cool. I like Monty Don. I have very little experience with ponds actually. And gardening in general, I'm rubbish. I can't even keep house plants. So that's a fact.
Your plants are automatically watered.
Exactly. It's easy, isn't it? Yeah. Yes.
So most of the substrates you use have a higher cation ratio.
Mhm.
And do you have a specific regimen that you use as far as dosing, high light versus low light in most of your tanks?
Yeah, I follow a rough rule. So I used to dose from day one, but now I'll probably wait a week or two. In a high light tank, high CO2, I'll dose after talking gallons, don't I?
No, it's
We can convert.
Can you?
Yeah.
3.8 litres to a gallon. Or
4 would be easy.
4, isn't it? Yeah. So in a 100 litre, 25 gallon. Really quick, aren't I? Aquarium, I'll probably start off with, in a high-tech tank, 5 mil a day, 5 to 10 mil every day, and then obviously the water changes, which we talked about earlier. In a low-tech tank, anything down to like 1 mil, but a sliding scale of how much light, what plants you've got, plant intensity, soil, etc.
Is it more important to do it on a daily basis, or can you dose in higher amounts throughout the week?
I prefer daily, little and often. I find I get better results with that, because the plants are kind of, kind of doing this rather than like this. Yeah. Closer.
So I know you're involved with that new product, Felix. Is there any talk of you guys working with companies like algae to send out alerts that, hey, filters clog, like sensors in these?
Yeah, absolutely. There's lots of stuff in the pipeline, things like that. Can't really say more than that, I'm afraid. Come and see me later. Hello. Oh, hello.
So is there a better time during the day to actually dose the fertilizer?
If you're doing it every day, I don't think it really matters. I tend to just make sure it's a regular thing, so I just make it part of my daily routine in the morning. I just do it kind of first thing in the morning. In fact, on my bigger tank I have an auto doser now, which doses about an hour or so before the lights come on. I don't think it really matters that much. Yeah. Hello?
Hi. So in all my plant tanks, I cut my tap water, being Chicago tap water is pretty hard, with RO water to kind of reduce the carbonate hardness and make it easier for the plants to absorb nutrients from the leaves.
Yes.
Have you ever had any experience with that? Noticing less algae, better plant growth?
Yeah, it's a great point. I also have hard water. I think it's similar chemistry to here actually. And you're right, the softer the water generally, the easier the plants have it. But the trade-off for me is the hassle I have to go through to soften the water is more than the hassle I have to add a little bit more CO2 or a little bit more fertiliser. And I generally stick to easy plants as well. So it's horses for courses. If you want to grow demanding stem plants, get the best growth, less kind of lime scale build up, and potentially keep more demanding fish, then yes, soften the water, and you will get arguably better results. Anyone else? Hello?
This might sound geographically ignorant, and so I'm making some assumptions, but it seems like a lot of the boutique and specialty shops that you visit in your videos, like Scape Nature, which was incredible, or Aquarium Gardens, are not in real metropolitan areas.
Mm-hmm.
What is it about their location and I guess the environment economically and maybe culturally that allows them to succeed in places that don't have a high population base?
That's an interesting question. I'm forgetting to repeat the question. I do apologise to the internet people. You're asking basically how shops can thrive in poor areas. That's what you're asking.
Well, I mean, no, I don't know that they're poor or not.
I just wanted to sum it up really quickly.
No, but I'm just saying it's not like Brooklyn Hardscape where it's in a huge population. It does seem like it's a little more rural than London.
I think it's almost random. So the person that wants to set up the store is absolutely passionate, and they just happen to live where they live, and then they're so passionate that they promote it online, social media. They have a good online presence as well, and they make it a destination, so people are happy to travel.
Yeah.
And actually, in the UK, it only takes sort of 3 or 4 hours to travel from one end to the other.
Right.
So actually, it's not, compared to the US, it's obviously a bit, obviously a lot smaller, so easier for people to get there. But the shops you just mentioned, like Aquarium Gardens has a huge online presence, so a large percentage of their business will be online, although it is an excellent destination for people to go, and people will happily drive for hours to get there. So and that's how any business will survive, is just by having a great service, great products, great customer service, and be an inspirational place for people to visit. It doesn't really matter where you are to achieve those things, to have success.
One more question.
One more question. Make it a good one.
Alright, fine.
Yeah.
Red or blue?
Blue. No, red. Red kill every time.
Red is the paid raffle ticket.
Red. Woo! Okay, thanks everyone.
Hand of applause for our demo speaker, George. Also, a huge thank you to Ozzy and our other sponsors, SR Aquaristic, UNS, who donated our beautiful water tank, beautiful tank here, and all the nice equipment out here. We are going to finish this up. Louder? Oh, I speak up louder, sorry. What we're going to do now is we're going to take a brief moment, so anyone who wants to purchase any more raffle tickets for this giveaway, please see Rich. Just to give you guys an idea, all the proceeds from this are going to a nonprofit organization. we're trying to decide on whether we're going to donate to the shed or one of the other organizations.
Project Piava.
Project Piava. So, and also, after following this, we're going to start raffling off our items.